I'm super, super excited. Like, I can't wait. I can't wait. I've got my strawberries and cream. I know it's meant for tennis, but I thought I'm just going to pull it down for the pull it down for the football because of that use up. Anyway, we're waiting for our league coming on. So last month, Wayne thought it was a 7 o'clock start because we changed it. And I think this month, Lee thinks it's a 7 o'clock start. So we're all just normal. We're just going to muck in together. I'm really excited about tonight because a lot of people have been doing rent to rent. Now, as a sourcing agent, I don't source rent to rent because I would rather people buy the property. And in my head, I haven't done rent to rent before. I know the concept, but I'm like, right, okay, what's the downfalls? What's the benefit? You know, a lot of people are paying like 20 grand memberships for a year's mentoring on rent to rent. I'm thinking, well, it's quite straightforward apart from illegals and stuff like that. It's like, so why are people selling in hundreds and hundreds of courses these rents? And is anybody doing it, making any money? Because if you are, please change our mind and tell us how you are doing this. Now, we've got a couple of people on tonight. So Victoria's, as a landlord, doing a rent to rent. So she's going to tell us quickly about what she thinks. And then we've got our very own Bev Tyndale, who has turned it into a full-blown business. But let's see what Bev thought, what she got sold to what she actually has to do in that business. And then we've got Wayne for all of the finance stuff. So where does that leave us with mortgages and all sorts of things go in my head? And we've got Lee, who should be here soon.
I'm here.
Oh, hello, Lee. Hello.
Sorry, everyone.
Hello, hello. So let's just get to it. It's more like a chat, and you know, if you want to put your hand up, if you've had any experience with rent to rent, or you want to ask any questions, because we've got legals and finance both on this Zoom tonight. So let's get cracking. So what I think I'll do, I'll just do like a very quick what I think. What attracts people to a rent to rent deal? And I think it's because there's low capital in, or so they say, and you haven't got to put your big deposits in if you were buying a property. And you know, if you can't get a mortgage, it's a good strategy because you're like classed as a management agent, I think. So it's like, you know, you don't actually need mortgages, or you've got bad credit, then you can still do these rent to rent properties. Quick cash flow, so they say, you know, you get it and you've got cash flow in from day one. Unless obviously I'm thinking you've got to do the furniture packages and the sourcing fee. Does that work out about 10 or 12,000? I'm thinking, well, you could actually buy a property for like 15 grand to 20 grand deposit in the northeast, a grown asset, grown equity, capital growth, leaving a legacy for your family. So in my head, I'm like, how does that, you know, how does that all work? So, and I'm thinking the people involved are a tenant, the landlord, and the management agent, or the agent who's actually doing the rent to rent. So I can see how all that works, but I just wanted to know from, we'll ask Victoria quickly what her experience is. Because I'm like, what about insurance? How does legals all work? And I think Wayne's got a case where something went a bit wrong that he's going to share with us. So let's just have a little deep dive into this strategy and, you know, like time-wise, how much time do we need to put in this strategy for that return? And is that return true? So I think I'll ask Victoria if she's there. Hi, Victoria. Can you unmute and just give us a very brief encounter of you as a landlord and what effect it's had on you and what you think of this strategy?
Okay, so I've got buy-to-let as well, but I thought I would try, when I was first starting out last year, to try rent serviced accommodation. And my take on it is that it can work, but be very sure of the management company. You've got to make sure you're completely 100% confident that they're acting in your best interests rather than their own. That would be one thing just to watch out for. And you can have quite substantial startup costs, which you mentioned, Debbie. So furniture, and then the sourcing fee can be quite high. Then you might have with the management company a setup fee or you know, when they set it up for the platform and the photographs and this kind of thing. So if you were doing it self-managed, then I think that certainly the property that I had could work in that way, and somebody did actually take that on after I exited it. But it was very much for me a question of, is the management company really acting in my interests? They would do things like massively discount the rate to get people in. You're in the situation where you have still high utilities because you've got occupancy, but you're not getting any cash flow from it. So the other thing to watch out for that is, I would say, you know, if you self-manage and you have your own team, then you know again that team are working with you for you to help you get things done quickly, apart from anything else, and make sure you know what you will be liable to cover and what the owner of the property that you're renting from, because you're having to go through a letting agent to get a plumber for a leak. Then you're on somebody else's time frame the whole time. So it's really important, I think, to have your own people that you can call on.
So as a landlord like me, because I'll be a landlord, not a management agent, really, obviously you've got all the booking fees and all that sort of stuff, and because yours was like through the platforms, you had all that, and then
Yeah.
you don't know really what you're getting every month for definite, not even like worst case, best case. So
No.
I like certain cash flow. So it's
Yeah.
like we all need that to cover our mortgages and stuff like that. So that's where I would be with you on that one. So should we go to Bev just quickly, because Bev's turned this into a business and
Yeah.
managing that one. So
Yeah.
Bev, do you want to tell us quickly about your business and what, you know, you went into this and you're doing the right thing by getting educated, but I don't think that education was worth the money and you had to find out a lot yourself. So chat us through a little bit about that, because I think people's getting hooked in on the money side of things, big cash flow, little money in, all of that. And, you know, I'm not saying it's not, the strategy doesn't work. I'm just trying to get my head around for everybody else who's looking at this strategy, what to look out for, what to expect, and the real money and cash flow. Because at the end of the day, everybody's working in a job as well. And you know, you're leaving one job to do another job. In my eyes, it's not passive income. It's like you're creating a business, a job that you probably need to be in it. But you tell me, because you're doing this.
Yeah, well, luckily I'd already had SA before we decided to make it into a business and do some rent to rents as well. So I knew exactly what was involved, and I knew really that the cash flow is not there like they say it's going to be when you're using a management agent. So we decided that we were just going to self-manage. We would still have them up on the platforms, but like Airbnb, Booking.com and all the rest of Urbo and what have you. But we would get mentored in how to get contractor bookings, direct bookings and all of this, how to get all the systems in place and everything, and paid a massive amount for a mentorship. That was a complete pile of crap, basically. We're halfway through the mentorship. We haven't been on the calls for about at least 2 months or whatever, because we went with this lady because she had what we thought was a decent track record, and she was a lecturer at the university in business studies, and so we thought this would be great. We thought we were going to get all the systems brought in, so all we need to do was upload the systems, get straight into it, everything would be hunky-dory and fine, which was a complete bloody nightmare, because the exact opposite happened. She would only give us little snippets of different things. She wouldn't let us download all of the systems and everything. And I ended up, she was teaching people in our mentorship group how to buy properties or how to do rent to rents in completely the wrong way. It was just against the law. And I kept having to say, but you can't really do that because you have to do it this way, sitting in a group of people. And I wasn't paying 20 odd grand to have to, I was paying, you know, they should have been paying me.
Yes.
But that's one thing that you've got to look out for. You have to really study who is going to do this, because I know she had 38 properties that she was doing rent, that some of them were rent to rents and some of them she owned, that she was doing the serviced accommodation with, and she was saying that you could make 10 grand a month on one property and all the rest, but she only got decent pickings off 10 of her 38 properties, but she didn't tell us that at the time. She said all of them were doing that. Now, rent to rent can be a really good strategy, but you have to get it right. You have to get the right size house in the right place, because don't forget, you have to pay the rent every month. Then you have to pay your council tax. Then you have to pay the gas, the electric, the water rates, the broadband, the telly license, everything. It's not just paying the rent, it's the whole thing. Then kitting it all out and then being on the end of the phone if something goes wrong. So you really have to think about it before you do it and get it right. And if you're using a management agent, that's when your profits are going to go. We still doing our own management and we still cleaning our own properties until we get up to scratch, because that's how we need to do it to be able to build our business and put some money in the bank.
Yeah. And I think you've been honest with that 20 grand mentorship. Good job you knew something about this strategy in anyway. But these newbies who are going into strategy, do you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, you have to graft. You're not going to have a full-time job and be able to do rent to rent and manage it yourself. It's just, you're just going to be stressed and, and it's just creating another job for yourself. And if you're like me in your 50s, it's like, why would you want another job? And this is important about areas and getting all the information and reaching out to people who are doing this and being honest about the work. So, Bev, you've got other strategies. You've got support living, you've got buy-to-let, and you've got rent-to-rent.
Yeah.
So, basically, there's different strategies now. So, you buy-to-let, capital growth, passive income. If we've got the right management agent, again, you have to have the right management agent. And the rents increase. You know what rent you're getting to cover your mortgage, and you've got properties, a portfolio you can put in a trust and build that up for a legacy for your family. Rent to rent, good cash flow, but it's like a job.
Yeah.
So at some point I'm thinking they're going to sell the rent to rents, cash in, and just do all of your because you're at the beach now, aren't you? So
with me gin and tonic.
Oh, lovely. So
I think you just have to be really careful. I knew what it would entail, and it's still a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. But it's the pull out, and you don't actually know that the main things are get the right property in the right place if you're going to do rent to rent, because you have to pay that rent and you have to pay all the rest of them bills.
Yeah.
And to get somebody that's already doing it to teach you what to do, somebody that's already in the thick of it.
And then you've got the rent to rents, isn't it? So you've got the rent to rent. So I know we're going to go on the legal side, which I'm really interested, and the finance side and insurance as well. So I've been speaking to Brad today about it, and it's like, the rent to rent side where somebody can guarantee the rent for you. Fair enough, but you need to make sure they know their stuff and that they're going to be able to do that.
To pay it.
At the end of the day, if they can't pay the rent, I'm not going to go to Lingo. I need to take these to the cleaners because that's probably going to cost us 10 or 20 grand. Do you know what I mean? So it's like there's always a cost involved. Even if they're saying PGs, whatever they're saying, there's a massive cost and headache involved in this strategy. So I've been offered full rent up front for a year for a normal buy-to-let, not just me, it's out there for everybody, and I'll go at market rent. So you think, well, okay, then why would I want to do a rent to rent with somebody when they're going to give me, and this is for normal tenants, so it's all tickety-boo, not like social housing, support living, anything like that. And then I got offered the other day above market rent. So I'll give you £950 for a 2-bedroom, 2-reception room, cottage in Barnes a month on a 2-year lease. And then I said, right, who's going into my property? Well, you don't worry about that. You don't worry about that. Just have the lease with me, my personal name, and I can give you a PG, or I can do it in a company. And I'll go, yeah, but who's the tenant? Well, I work with the council, I work with this, and I thought it's emergency housing. But we need to know to tell Wayne, my broker for the mortgages, and I need to double check over the agreement. Somebody's on the toilet. I'll just. So it's all these things going in my head. So I think, thank you for sharing, Bev. And I think Bev's such a lovely person. If anybody was thinking about rent to rent, or they've signed up for a mentorship or anything like that, reach out to her. Obviously, we can't take all her time, but she loves to help people and just keep us on the straight and narrow. Right. So sorry, Victoria.
I just wanted to say I wanted to thank Bev, because Bev's helped me out, and honestly, really fantastic. Thanks so much, Bev. Really
No
appreciate
problem
it.
at all. Anytime.
So we'll all say thanks, Bev. Now, don't get a big head, Bev. The screen's not big enough for both of us. So let's have a little. Is there anybody got any experience or any questions? Just in my head, I'm like, right, legally, how do we stand with Lee? And obviously financially with Wayne, and then Wayne's going to share something with us. And then insurance wise, surely we've got to tell the insurance like who the tenant is and what we're doing. So Sharon Simpson just raised her hand. So we'll take Sharon's question, and then what we'll go with, I think we'll go straight on to Lee, if that's all right, Lee, just a bit about the legal side that we'll have to look at. Go on then, Sharon, where are you?
Sorry, it wasn't a question. I was just going to say that I've done some rent to rents. Been doing it now for like 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But more, it's rent. I've got 2 houses rent to HMO,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been really successful for us here in Brighton. We've had
Right.
full occupancy throughout. We've had everyone paying the rents. We've been able to put the rents up as well. During the time when all the energy prices went up, then our profit was quite minimal, but now it's balanced out again.
Yeah.
But then it came to the end of the contract and we wanted to extend, but the landlords wanted the properties back.
Mm.
And the
business
reason
up and
they
then,
gave
yeah.
was because of the possible abolishment of Section 21. And the landlords were a bit insecure about being able to get their property back. So, you've got 2 houses with 13 people in there. And they're worried, basically, that they might have to sit in tenants who are not paying their rent, and therefore I might not be able to pay the rent, etc. So,
yeah.
So actually, I think it's going to be quite difficult in the future
For the rent to
HMOs
rent.
anyway, for HMOs, yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're going to touch on as well, if you're a newbie, do you need management experience? Is that the other? So, and we'll go to Lee and then Wayne. And Sharon, on that with the HMO side of things. So were you involved in that business in any way?
Yes, I was. Oh, yes,
For me,
absolutely.
I don't want to do that.
Yes, I
God
mean,
help them if I had to clean
you've
up
got-
scrap.
yes, when the cleaner doesn't turn up,
Yeah.
you've got tenants sometimes in the same week, you might have 2 tenants leaving and new tenants moving in. And that whole process of the leaving and setting up new tenancy agreements, it's very
Time consuming, especially if
time
you're
consuming.
working.
Yeah, like administration wise.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
late nights, 3 o'clock in the morning, getting all these documents done.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
it has,
if
it
you had
has
it
been.
took you out of that business, it wouldn't have been as profitable. So we need to look at, I think, strategies. And I get it. Do you know what I mean? I do get it. But strategies where, very minimum work for the return, even if it's a smaller return. Do you know what I mean? Because it's all about get my time back, spend time with family or friends or in the pub or whatever. So yeah, I get it. But I'm just trying to get my head on the ROI for me. A lot of people are working. So time is the problem. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get my head around everything. Right, our amazing lawyer, I call him a lawyer, you think I was in America, wouldn't you? Our amazing solicitor, sassy solicitor, Lee Gilder is going to give us a legal rundown.
Hello, everyone. I don't know, can I share my screen? Because I've actually prepared a presentation for you all.
Have
Can I
you?
get a
Well,
woo?
let's
Yes.
have a little look. Right. So, please, please, right. We've been really, really good. So I've got multiple participants can share. So
Okay,
then
so let me try.
see if it can go on.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, I can see a little doggy. Oh my God, so cute. We usually have prizes for kids and dogs.
Can anyone see that?
Yeah.
Not full screen, mate.
Not full
Oh,
screen.
No, it's like a presentation with a little slides down the side and the do-do.
How do I put it on to things? Oh, I thought I was going so well then, and now I've just don't know
I
what I'm
think
doing.
it's at the top, isn't it? Oh.
Down at the bottom, the little screeny thing. Left, right, 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 right.
This one.
Yeah.
Oh, would you look at that?
Now we can see
Can you see the next slides coming up and everything on this, or just the main screen?
all of it.
Okay, it doesn't really matter. But yes, welcome everyone.
All right, we're all friends. Won't we?
Yeah, I've got no secrets now. If you can see what's coming up. So it wouldn't be me if I wasn't plugging the firm. So let me just quickly rattle through these ones to kind of give you an idea of what we can assist you with. I don't know if it's sorry, 2 seconds because right, that's fine. I've got two screens on my laptop, so it's just confusing for me. Anyway, areas of law that we practice are up on the screen there. I won't go into any great depth of any of them because most of people on here know who I am anyway. In terms of the stuff that you all like to do, again, some of people have seen this time and time again, so apologies. But we like to kind of specialize more in the kind of the quirky stuff. Obviously, your buy to lets, we can assist with those, whether you're selling, you're buying, you're refinancing, whatever. But we like to get down and dirty with all these other kind of fun things that we love to do. So your lease options, your management agreements, which is essentially a rent to whatever you want to call it agreement. Bridging finance, we act for private investors, you name it, we can generally help with it. So obviously specializing more tonight in terms of what we're going to talk about is the rent to ... So obviously rent to rent is the main one that people use the term for, and that's just the ability to rent a property from a landlord and then re-rent it out yourself. There are lots of other, and people have touched on these tonight already. So you get rent to SA, so that's your service to accommodation. You rent to HMO, so your house of multiple occupancy. I'm sure there's loads more that are, in terms of terminology, whirling around everywhere. But they all have essentially the same thing. It's you taking on somebody else's property to do whatever the second part of the two is. So whether you're going to have it as service accommodation, have it as just a single buy to let, have it as a HMO, whatever it may be, but it's a document essentially that enables you to do it. Moving on, there's quite a few slides that I've prepared in terms of risks and issues that you have to consider. And I'll kind of elaborate more on each one of them because obviously you can see what I've written already. The first obvious one, and we've again touched on this tonight, is that you will never own the property. You are just basically utilizing somebody else's property for whatever it is that you're wanting to do, whether it's your service accommodation, your single let, whatever it may be. So there is kind of that issue that you don't have that capital asset there. There is no capital growth. It's just merely an agreement to do whatever you're doing with the property. So in terms of leading on to the second point, the security is very limited. There is no security, essentially. You do have a legal agreement. It's a contract. It's not secured anywhere. It's not something that you pop onto the land registry title deeds and you've got some restriction there that means that the landlord can't dispose of it because your agreement sat there. It's just a contractual agreement between you and them. And it gives you that security and that security only. And as Debbie alluded to earlier, the likelihoods of you going to enforce a document like that are probably not a non-existent because the cost of any sort of litigation are you're talking in excess of 10 grand probably, and your losses are probably less than that, so you wouldn't, but it's still a significant loss to you if something were to go wrong. So you just have to be aware of what the risks are, which is why we're kind of putting this on tonight. Moving on, so number point three there, you are basically zhuzhing up someone else's property. You know, you're maintaining it for them, you're redecorating it regularly as per the agreement that you've probably signed. You're doing a lot to the property that you do not own. So in terms of the value, you could be adding tens of thousands of pounds onto somebody else's property, and you're never going to get that back. I suppose the opposite argument to that may be is, well, you're getting the rental benefit of it. And yes, that's right. But as you've heard from people tonight, that's not necessarily as big as you might be being told it could be from a strategy like this. So you just have to be, you know, if you're going to do it, that's fine. No one's here to tell you you can't. But you've really got to just understand and accept that that's what's potentially going to happen. And if you can accept that, then fine. Point four, this kind of speaks for itself. As Sharon was saying earlier, if you have a void period for any reason whatsoever, the costs of the rent, the costs of the utilities, the costs of the insurance, the costs of absolutely everything will not just stop because you haven't got that filled for whatever reason. You have to continue to pay that. And, you know, there's lots of reasons why you could have a void period. So I put on there, like, you know, nearby roadworks. If you're renting this out as a HMO or a serviced accommodation to professionals or whatever, and they've ripped the entirety of the road up, they're doing works for ages, you know, for weeks on end, and you've got a professional that can work from the property sometimes, but needs to be in and out of a particular place and is renting the property, it's not going to be good for them, and you're going to really struggle. But the costs don't just stop with people not wanting to rent from you. So you just have to, again, be very much aware that it could cost you a heck of a lot of money if you've got nothing going on with that property. There's a big bit we've put here in the last kind of, not the last 2 points, but the 5 and 6, and this is to do with the powers of attorney. So in an agreement like this, you have to remember that the property isn't yours. So you do not have the legal right to say whatever happens to that property at all. The only way you're going to have some form of a say is if you incorporate some form of a power of attorney within the document itself. And unfortunately, many landlords will not give a generic power of attorney for you to start signing documents and signing up to utilities and doing all this sort of stuff without, well, they just won't do it. You can get very specific powers of attorney that allow you to do certain things, and that might be more acceptable to a landlord if you're looking to do something like this. But to get a generic power of attorney, it's just not going to be advised by any solicitor acting for the landlord, because it's just a crazy thing to allow somebody to be able to sign absolutely anything in terms of that property without you even knowing that's what's going on. And you kind of have to put that into perspective of utilities. If you wanted to change utility company, that's not necessarily as easily done if you don't own it. If you've just got an agreement there that, you know, is just you renting it from somebody to re-rent it back out, you might struggle with even silly things like that. Or there's a gas leak at the property, or you know, somebody needs to come out and do something, I don't know, serious with the electrics. You're not the owner of that property, so that third party person might not want to liaise with you, and to keep having to go back to the landlord for any type of consent is cumbersome. It's time consuming. The landlord's probably not going to want that. It's just going to become a bit of a nightmare if it's something that is what would naturally be relatively or very straightforward if you own the property. It becomes far more convoluted if you don't, and you just have to consider that as well, because a landlord, the benefit to a landlord is kind of diminishing if they've got to consent to absolutely everything, and every 2 minutes you're calling them at whatever time at night saying, can you just, if I just email you this document, can you just sign it quickly for me because I need to do this, this, and this? It's just not going to really work. So it's just another issue to be aware of. Moving on, and it isn't all doom and gloom, I promise. I have put one positive on the next slide. I could only find one. Sorry. You have to take consideration of external factors, so legislative changes, and we all know that happens very frequently to all you wonderful landlords. You know, it does annoy me when all these things are put horrendous constraints on landlords, because this is your chosen job. My chosen job is to be a solicitor, and I'm taxed accordingly. You have to be taxed upon tax, and it's a whole argument in its own right. But if anything were to change, you're potentially going to end up suffering as a result of that. And you just got to be careful of these sorts of, I mean, you can never future plan like that really, but you just have to be aware that if things were to change, this strategy that you've relied heavily on, if you're not someone like Bev who's got that diverse portfolio of different strategies, you're going to become very stuck very quick. The agreement, again, I've mentioned there, it's not registered anywhere. It's just a contractual agreement. I've kind of touched upon this anyway. It is enforceable through the court like any contract would, but who on earth is going to be doing that? You know, unless you've got pots of money, you're just not, and therefore you're just going to have to cut your losses and move on. This is the bit where you also have to be really careful, is if there is a mortgage over the property, this whole strategy might be a no-starter straight away. Because I don't know many lenders, and Wayne can probably touch on this in a bit, that will agree to lend on something where you've got this type of an agreement sat there. This is very different, you have to remember, from a commercial lease for social housing or something like that, because that's a lease. That's a security in its own right. This isn't. This is just a document that is governing what should be done by whom, by when, and how. And if you have that mortgage, you're not likely to get permission, and consent would have to be obtained from the lender to do it. If the lender were to repossess, you're going to be, you've got no choice but to go, oh, I've got this agreement, you can't do that. It doesn't matter. They've got that property irrespective of what agreement that you may have signed with the landlord. And everything you've built up can just go instantly if they fall into any sort of arrears, because you've got no control over, when you give that money to the landlord, where they spend that money. They might not be paying that mortgage off that they're saying that they're going to do within that agreement. They could be flying around all over the world enjoying that money you're paying them. And if they get into financial difficulties, you're out there quicker than you were in it, and you've lost every bit of money you've spent, everything's gone. And again, a power of attorney, which touches briefly on my last point, but a power of attorney, they will be limited. And if the donor, as in the landlord, were to lose capacity, that power of attorney is non-existent anymore. And they don't have that capacity. That you can't say, oh, well, I can still sign on their behalf because they gave me power of attorney. It doesn't work like that. It's gone. So that's another real issue that you have to consider. And you know, with all these sorts of agreements and rent to whatever you want to do, you're putting, you know, you've got to think logically as well as kind of commercially, that a landlord might not want to do anything with that property, and that's why they've agreed to let you to do it, because they want that hands-off approach. But if they see the money that you're potentially making on this one, there is nothing to stop them from just saying, I want my property back, get out, and you can fight it. And you probably would win because they're breaching the agreement themselves. But if you're going to pay for that, coupled with, I'll let them have their year, 2 years, whatever it is, and then I'm just going to take it back and I'm going to do the same thing for all the money that they're making, rather than that little bit that I'm cutting off the side. And that whole business you've built up, that goodwill, everything in your business that you've done with that property is gone for this particular one that where you might be talking about. If you've got the same landlord that you've got multiple properties of, it's a bit different. But you've got the odd one here and there for different people. There is absolutely nothing that you've got no right to renew this agreement, this document, like you have a commercial lease if it's within the 1954 Act. You don't have any of that security whatsoever. So you just need to be alert to all of this. And like I say, it's not all horrendously doom and gloom. I'll put my positive on it. And it's been touched upon with multiple people that I've kind of given you their, 2 pence worth on this particular topic. If you do find the right landlord, and they generally are an ethical individual, it can be good cash flow for your business. I do agree with the comments in that you really probably should have a diverse strategy portfolio of different things, and this could be one of the cash flow parts of your portfolio. And then you've got your capital growth and your vitalets and your whatever else that you're going to do. But if you do find them, we've got clients that I've dealt with these sorts of agreements for, and they're flying and they're doing really well. Again, they've touched upon the difference between doing it yourself and a management company. Anything like third party involvement is going to heavily reduce your input of cash. But again, it's all the time. Do you have the time to spend doing this sort of stuff? It's not just an hour here or there. It's really tiresome in when you're doing these sorts of agreements. And just one kind of negative one I had a client that actually had an agreement like this over her property that wasn't unencumbered, and she needed that property as security for another purchase she was making. They wouldn't lend to her because it had the agreement on, and she couldn't end it because the clause that was draft. I mean, the document. I felt terribly sorry for them, but the document was really bad. It was so heavily drafted in the tenant's perspective, and obviously they didn't get legal advice. But there was absolutely no get out of jail free card for her, and she was stuck. It really was horrible and kind of really pulled on the heartstrings. But the document's there, and unless you're prepared to just take that risk and change the locks, which I wouldn't recommend doing either, you're stuck. You're stuck with the agreement. So from the landlord's perspective, she was really, really stuck. But it can be lucrative. Like I say, it's not all doom and gloom. And if you want my details, there you are.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastically. So what we're finding is now, so really, before you do rent to rent, speak to a solicitor. I know it's going to cost you a bit of money. Get it all checked. I mean, look at Sharon. She built that business up for 2 years. And that cash flow got took away from her, even though she was working in the business a little bit. You can't guarantee over a certain amount of time because the landlord might just end. I'm sure there is positives in the sort of rent to rent. So as a management agent, I can see positives. Like if I got a corporate let with contractors for 2 years at a certain rate, and then I sort of rented, done that on a landlord's property, and maybe I took a 15% management fee or 20 for getting that uplift on the corporate let. So I can see different things. It's just knowing the legal side, the insurance and the finance. So we can take one question for Lee, if there's any questions.
I would just point as well, because it's an agreement, everything is negotiable. So this particular one on this particular client I just mentioned, it was really an awful, awful agreement. And, nobody likes to get, because it does cost sometimes, or it's just, oh, it doesn't matter, I've done it before, and this one I can just copy and paste. I've seen that all too often. Don't copy and paste things because it can go really badly wrong. But if you're looking to kind of do it, it's all negotiable.
Yeah, I think it's probably 1 or 2 grand, is it, for a decent, robust contract, Lee, that you
Yeah.
do just to
It's about £1,500. We do it. It does depend on length on property, whether it's leasehold, because the agreement's different then because you have to incorporate lease and other things. But again, it's we'll work with people. It's our output is not let's just make as much money from all of you people as we can, but that's not what we're about. It's about helping you to understand what you're doing as well. It's all well and good me saying this is what it means, or I'm telling you what you need to do, but you need to understand all of it, so you can make those informed decisions.
Yeah,
I think as well, sorry, I think as well it has to be a win-win for both. It's no good airing it all in your favour because it'll come back and bite you in the backside.
Yeah.
It
If it
has
goes
to
to
be
court, the
win-win.
courts exactly the courts are never gonna. You have to always remember the courts always tend to look more favourably at the tenant because they're the ones in their eyes the weaker party. But if you have something that's so heavily drafted in one or the other the favour, then it's just not going to go well when you're starting to argue about it, and that's when the costs are just going to go up and up and up.
Yeah. So some good advice there. So I know Victoria's put, yeah, at some point there was 100% occupancy, but what was the money like? Did they get somebody in for a month, but they had to reduce the price, but it was 100% occupied? So for me, yeah, so it's like, what did that money actually look like? So that was really helpful. Thank you so much, Lee. Let's go on to Wayne for the obviously Wayne's got an example of something, and also the side on the finance. So as a landlord, us with mortgages, which we've all got, that's part of our strategy. We leverage the bank. What would that look like if I wanted to do rent with somebody, they wanted to do rent on my property?
Can we see the right screen?
Yeah.
Perfect, grand. Well, guys, I think most of you know me as with Lee, but if you don't, my name's Wayne. I'm the managing director of DMI Finance. We're a mortgage broker working on a national basis, happen to be based in the Southwest, but it really doesn't matter where you are, where the property is, or what it is in the UK that you're investing in. I think, one thing I get the benefits of rent to rent, guys. I do all the high level benefits, low entry, very few barriers to entry, low cost entry, but and we're not all about negatives, but there are some. There are definitely, I think, there's an element of possibly easy come, easy go. The experience that you need, or when you're putting your own money into something, you're putting blood, sweat, and tears, hurt money into it, skin in the game. I think you'll be loath to risk things in the way that you might when the barrier to entry is possibly as modest as it is for rent to rent. Now, high level, guys, what I would say first off is that the majority of responsibilities and potential challenges are borne by the landlord, the property owner, rather than you, the renter. However, as you'll see as I go down, it really doesn't exonerate you or from any responsibility, guys. First off, if the property is mortgaged, conditions, as Lee's mentioned, will almost certainly apply, and generally speaking, those conditions will require that the only tenancy allowed in that property is an assured short-hold tenancy, which will almost certainly mean that the agreement that you're seeking with the landlord wouldn't be acceptable to the mortgage lender. Now, you could say, well, it's not my problem. I'll just let the vendor, the owner, deal with it, and I'll enter into whatever agreement I want. The point here is that you might say, well, a lender will never find out. That might be the case, but if they do, failure to do so could result in the mortgage company calling in the debt and seeking immediate payment. Yeah, so don't just think that by entering this agreement, the mortgage isn't yours, you've got no terms and conditions to agree to with the mortgage lender, because it could come back to bite you on the arse. It really could. Now, and the point is that you've spent a lot of time and effort negotiating the deal with the current landlord. You've spent money perhaps on carrying out refurbishments to the property. You've furnished the property. You've gone and secured tenants. If it is that the mortgage lender calls in the debt, then all that's lost. And don't just think it won't be. So in almost all circumstances, if they've got a mortgage on a property, the reality is they absolutely will need to have consent from their mortgage lender, and that consent may not be forthcoming. Now, certainly that you take that one step further. If you're not just doing rent to rent, rent to standard buy-to-let, and you're doing rent to SA or rent to HMO, then that is going to bring further issues to it. If the current landlord's mortgage is a residential mortgage, their own home, a PPR mortgage, or a standard buy-to-let, it is guaranteed to be the case that they're not going to be content in that property being let as an SA or an HMO. I can't say I've seen ever that be the case. So just don't think that it doesn't apply to you. It absolutely does. And there is a strong chance that the lender wouldn't accept it. And there is a good chance they'd find out. And as I say, there will be people that will say, well, it's the landlord's problem. But really don't take that approach. One big point to note is that when you're, say, take the HMO side, and I'd be interested to know, Sharon, whether your landlord was letting that property as an HMO, or whether they were letting it as a buy-to-let before. Of course, the cynic in me thinks, well, hang on, Sharon's done all the works to the property. She's now secured these really favourable tenants for me, and actually, I wonder if I should just take that back myself and let it as that. Of course, only time will tell, and it would be a real horrible position if that was the case. But I saw. Was it a buy-to-let first, or was it an HMO?
No, they're both HMOs in an Article 4 area, so they both had HMO licenses, and they were HMOs before I took them on. Yeah,
fantastic. Well, that's the next point, because if you're if you're letting it on an HMO basis, as I say, that barrier to entry is quite low. And a lot of people will go into this without the experience because they feel that, they bought it quite cheaply. If easy come to a degree, easy go, I'll hope that for the best and not kind of cater for the worst. And a lot of people will go into this, they won't get the consents, they'll just, and the landlord won't, because the landlord's taking his money and he thinks the responsibility is on you, but ultimately it's on you both. And we saw a case when I was looking at this very recently that had gone to the Supreme Court, and it was, I've written it here, Rackerson versus Jepson. And what the point was that the rent-to-renter, if you like, hadn't, and the landlord hadn't got an HMO license for the property. It wasn't up to compliance, and it needed it. And the tenants were well aware that it needed it, went and got a rent repayment order on the property. And now, of course, that would ordinarily go to the landlord. The person that owns the property would incur those costs and the burden of the rent repayment. However, they went to the Supreme Court, and it was argued that he didn't let the property, he didn't manage the property has nothing to do with him. He'd passed all, onus and responsibility on to the renter, and so be it. What happens? The renter had ended up being in a position that the rent repayment order sat as their responsibility. Buildings insurance, guys, although not directly related to mortgages as a specific requirement, I would state that the property must be adequately insured. And the long and the short is that anything outside of the normal process, I'm letting this on an AST to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, is likely to have certain nuances in their insurance policy. And again, you might say, well, not my problem, not my responsibility. But when it is that, the tenants cause a fire and, the tenants have to vacate the property and, the insurance won't pay out and the onus is still on you to keep paying this landlord his rent through the guaranteed period that you've agreed it with him, then of course the responsibility is very much on you, isn't it? So, it all has to be thought about. And then the only last thing I would say, and it's not from a mortgage lender's perspective for a mortgage that's already in place, but it's understanding that, you might be going into this, you might say, well, I have no properties at the moment, I don't own my own home, I don't own any investment property, but my real focus is to start getting into property, and this is an easy in for me. It's a very easy in, it's a great in, and it can really build your funds for a deposit. But just be aware, in the majority of instances, it's not going to gain you the experience that you need to meet a buy-to-let lender's eligibility criteria. If this is your only asset, you own no other properties, not your own home, not a buy-to-let, you're still, beneath that bottom rung on the ladder, as it were, is not going to increase your eligibility with the vast majority of buy-to-let lenders. But that's it from me, guys.
So we've got the legal side, obviously from an investor. You've got experience in doing rent-to-rent, and we've got the finance side. So Wayne, I know there's people out there doing these rent-to-rents where, so if they came to me, right, and they said, Debbie, I can give you £1,000 a month, guaranteed rent on your property, as a rent-to-rent. They're doing SA. So I would have to tell the lender, wouldn't I?
You'd absolutely need to tell the mortgage lender, 100%.
So if I didn't tell the mortgage lender, the place got trashed, and the SA company said, do you know what it is? I can't afford to put this right. Or there was squatters locked themselves in, or somebody died in the property. Then does that comes back on me, doesn't it? Because,
well, I think so. I mean, absolutely. I mean, certainly from an insurance perspective, it comes back on you. I think the general perception is that a mortgage lender would never find out, and that may be the case. They may never find out, but that is completely the wrong basis to proceed with anything. Ultimately, as we said, you'll probably want a diverse portfolio. The last thing you want to do is rub the mortgage lenders up the wrong way, get blacklisted, and then end up wanting to get buy-to-lets in the future. I think lenders will find out. It's like HMO, for example. People go into this And we have it on buy-to-lets where people will convert a buy-to-let to an HMO, and they'll need, if it's of a certain size, they'll need a license. Well, they don't realise that as soon as you apply for the HMO license to Southwark Council will look at the title registry, they'll see you've got a charge with Vida Home Loans, and they'll write to Vida Home Loans to say they're applying for an HMO license. So, you know, although the mortgage isn't your responsibility, it has such grave potential to come back and bite you on the backside when you've spent your hard-earned money setting this up as a rent-to-rent. So, you know, it might be less risky if it's rent-to-rent as a standard buy-to-let, but certainly, you know, you have to be very, very cautious about getting into the rent-to-SA, the rent-to-HMO, without really ensuring, and indeed with rent-to-rent, that they have got their mortgage lender's consent, that they've got the right insurance in place.
And I'm thinking, Wayne, if it was somebody who was set up like Bevwish was a management company who did this as a professional, and there is people out there I've been chatting to, rather than Joe Blogs rocking up saying, you know, I'll do rent-to-rent on your property, where they haven't got a management company, they're just sort of like been to a course and this is what they need to do. So I'm thinking the lenders would look on that more favourable than somebody with no experience, done a course, but you know, had no, like, sort of wasn't set up properly as a management company.
They would. I mean, that's the way that they suggest it should be done to be kind of legally and acceptable to mortgage lenders, where, you know, actually you're not subletting in their eyes the property, you're acting as a managing agent, and then there's an agreement, an AST agreement with the end tenant. Yeah, I think that would be far more acceptable to a mortgage lender. That's for sure.
And I'm just thinking this, yeah, so that, do you know, there's so many questions. So for me personally, I think, right, if you're going to do it properly, don't rely on the cash flow, because the landlord can pull the plug, something can happen, whatever. Do your buy-to-let, do your strategies where you're going to get that cash flow. You're going to build those assets, you're going to build that equity, you're going to build that capital growth. And honestly, if you haven't got much money, you just have to work harder using angels, which, you know, we can teach you how to do that. So don't let having, you know, little money put you off. Yes, it's harder and there's a process to it, but you need to try and buy assets, especially in this market as well. And especially, I'm not being funny, if you're in the northeast, you know, the cash flow, and you've got supported living, which will give you dealing direct with the charity, not dealing with the middle person, where you're going to get guaranteed rent for 5 years. It's all above board. Wayne knows who the charity is. He picks that lender for the charity, so they all know what's going on. They'll do the contracts. They're happy with the contract, so it's all, everybody can see everything. So if the shit does hit the fan, then we've done everything right. And I just think keep building them assets as well as doing your rent-to-rent, because, you know, you can really build that, you know, that portfolio as a legacy, and don't let having very little money put you off. Because I didn't have any money, and loads of people who I did education with back in the day had no money. We just have to work harder with the right power team around us, the legals, the finance, everything else to keep us right. It's a goer. So we're not saying don't do it. I think you've got lots of information tonight to think about before, as a landlord, you let somebody do the rent on your property, or as an investor paying for a course or a 20 grand membership over 12 months, what is the real value of that? Just sit and have a think and think, what else could I do with this money? And, you know, are you protected? So I think that's my rant over. I could do another one, but people have a rant every month, you know, and just like look into the strategies and the good bits and the bad bits. So we're not saying it's bad, just watch what you're doing and make sure you do everything right and speak to the professionals. Right, we've got 1 minute if anybody's got any questions, and then we can get ready to watch the match. Come on, England. Woo! Any questions at all? Let's have a little look on the chat. Lee says he's not going to do it. Lee, you're buying properties with me. We're buying properties. We're not some really good stock, and you're doing planning gains in any way. So if that's everything and you got lots out of that, you know, give us some feedback on different types of things you want to talk about every month. We can chat about anything. We can talk about everything. We've got the right power teams, and we look forward to working with you soon. So it's good night from him, and it's good night from me. Thank you, Bev. Thank you, Victoria. Let's get on with the match and come on, England. Woo! Speak soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.